or others wise known. If he does not tell him, then he will bear his guilt. 2. 2.
Oh, 2, yes. Anyone touching anything ceremonially unclean, such as the dead body of an unborn. I'm going to read from King James. Or if a soul touch any unclean thing, whether it be a carcass of an unclean beast, or a carcass of an unclean cow, or the carcass of unclean creeping things, and if it be hidden from him, he also shall be unclean and guilty.
So guys, watch this as we go into it.
What's the carcass?
Carcass.
Dead body.
Oh, dead body.
Carcass. So guys, look at this. He says, make sure, and then there's somebody else coming else. I put down for Leviticus 5:1, it says social and civil injustice. Refusing to stand up for truth and justice when one knows the truth. This is such a serious matter that it could lead to a wrong verdict in court, resulting in the execution of an innocent victim. Or this sin could lead to murder, violence, abuse, and a host of other sins and evil out on the streets. In the case of a nation, it could even result in war. Looking back again, and this is what I want you to say. Looking back again, remember now we're talking about a guilt offering. So we've dealt with a lot of offerings. This time we're on a guilt offering. And so now the person sins after he hears a public adoration to testify when he is a witness, whether he has seen or others wise known. If he does not tell it, then he will bear his guilt. Guys, what does that sound like? And what I want to do is put that into the church. Yeah, well, what do you say?
Unconfessed.
Unconfessed. Okay, so what does that sound like?
Judgment.
Yeah, but I said put it back into the church because this is where we don't realize it, but this is, as he's mentioned this to them, that he says this is basically judicial. So watch this. Then he's saying it goes to court. Well, guess what? You are in the church. There's something that's said about somebody or something you know that's wrong. Then are you to hold back?
No, you gotta clean it up.
You see what I'm saying? As he laid this law down, it is the law that still remains in this day. I'd rather not mention or I'd rather not talk about anyone. I'm just going to let it go. You can't. You have to deal with it head on. Watch this. Then I told you the reason then is because I said it could be a serious matter, right? It could lead to a wrong verdict, wrong attitude, wrong thought about someone, right? And this person could be innocent. Think about it, and you've murdered this person, or you've had this person murdered. All because you either held back on something that you could have easily brought forward, and it could have ended. But you didn't allow it to end because you thought what would be best is to be silenced. I've made this statement, I can't make it enough. You've been around people that are quiet in the church. Remember, that doesn't make them faithful. That just makes them quiet. And so what do you mean? Well, a lot of times we look and say, well, you know, that person's passive because that person's quiet. But in reality, that person could be also as much of a danger for the church as that person that runs off at the mouth all the time. Because not speaking is just as bad as speaking. Something you've seen, something you've heard needs to be brought to light. But a lot of times you figure, well, I don't want to be a part of it. I don't want to be the one that said it. When it is the truth, you bring it forward. He's talking about what kind of offering? A guilt offering. If you don't feel guilty behind not saying anything, something's wrong. You shouldn't feel guilty. Because you're just as much a part of the problem as that person that has produced the problem. Why? Because you don't say anything, you don't realize that that leaves your burden task to say that I go along with it. If you stop and think about it. I just didn't say anything, so I wanted to stay out of it. It's almost the ideal of, you got a Trump that's talking about taking presidential office, and you got the Hillary. And you're saying, what I'm going to do is I realize what's going on with Trump, but I also realize what's going on with Hillary. So what I'll do is I just won't vote. You know what I mean? And not realizing your vote could have made a decision on whether or not this person doesn't make it or this person does make it. See how serious this is? So this is what he's bringing to their attention. By the way, these laws are being given by God. They're not laws Moses is making up. They're laws that God has brought to their attention. You said in verse 2, you said that there was the idea of, you just asked for a carcass, right? You said, or if a person touches any unclean thing, whether a carcass or an unclean beast. So then go back and look at your paper. He's opening up something. It says religious defilement, touching or doing anything that defiles a person, that makes a person unclean, religiously or ceremony. After all, they were under what? The law. So they were under the law. So you, something happened. You could not go touch that dead animal and then come to worship Sunday. You couldn't do it. How many days, and we'll get into it farther until we're down the text. If something was uncleansed or something was dead, how many days were you to remain, or to stay away?
7.
You guys, somebody said? It's 7. 7 days. So can you imagine, even your loved one dies, and as they're getting ready to die, you're trying to race them to the hospital. They died. They're now considered unclean. And since they're considered unclean, now you have been defiled. You see how that works? You say, well, that works today, does it? Does that apply today? Doesn't apply today. And why?
Because Jesus.
Because we're under grace. See what's going on? And a lot of times we get caught up with Old Testament. That's why you have to be careful with Old Testament. You start reading Old Testament thinking that's what you're supposed to do. And not realizing this was the law that God gave them, and it was the shadow of things to come. But this is what the law was given to them, and this law was to protect them back then. It has the ability to remove their sins. So then watch this. In 3, somebody whose time was it in 3?
Or if he touches a human uncleanness, or whatever sort his uncleanness may be, which he becomes unclean, and it is hidden from him, and then he comes to know it, he will be guilty.
So now it goes another way. Guys, I've got human and personal defilement, touching or doing anything that makes a person unclean or defiled. So what are you talking about? What would you think that they would consider then humanly would be unclean? Think about it. What would be considered? Huh? I thought I heard somebody couldn't say it.
Oh, one administrator?
That's one. You got it. Even a woman on her menstrual period is considered unclean. You can't touch her. Yes.
They couldn't even, you wasn't even supposed to sleep in the same bed with them.
You got it. That's right. Isn't that something? You see what the world has done? You see how crazy the world is, and how here's a female going through a cleansing period, and some male still bothering that person. When they're going through a cleansing period, they shouldn't be touched. And when you're touching, then you too are considered unclean. So you see what God is doing? God is then saying, well, then that's not right. No, God is allowing you, as you go through your cleansing, not to be touched. You're trying to cleanse your body. And yet, I'll say your husband is trying to touch you. By the way, touch is what? Sexual. So you'll understand it. And no, he can't touch you. Not supposed to touch you. Let that cycle pass through. That's what he's supposed to do before he comes back to you. So listen to what he's talking about by just this touch. What are you doing, God? I'm covering every angle of uncleanliness. The first thought was what? An animal. Now the next thought is what? A human. What else was around that you couldn't touch somebody? There was something else too. Jim, that's going. And I want to know that on my thing. What else is there? How about something, huh? There you got it. There you got it. Leprosy. You couldn't touch it. Yeah. You're not to be around them. So how do you think they felt when Jesus touched the leprosy man and told him, you're healed. Now go to the word, to the priest. You've been healed. So how do you think they felt? Think about it. If anything, leprosy was what? Contagious. And here's Jesus that has tampered with this. How do you think his disciples may have felt? Here's Jesus who has touched someone, you turn over here, who's touched someone with leprosy. And so how do you think they would feel? Stop and think about it. We missed this, but you got to see it. This is Jesus' disciples. They also know the rules and regulations. Right. Stop and think about it. And they know that leprosy is contagious. And yet nothing happens to Jesus. Think about it. So watch this. He says in 4.
Or when a person swears an oath, speaking thoughtlessly with his lips, whether to do evil or to do good, with regards to any which the individual might speak thoughtlessly in an oath, even if he did not realize it, but he himself has later come to know it is guilty with regards to one of these oaths.
So then, pull your paper again. He says in 4, he says what?
Or when a person swears an oath, speaking.
Where you see it?
Your paper.
Verbal. See it, verbal sin?
Verbal sin or sins of the tongue, rash swelling, thoughtless.
Swearing. Rash swearing.
Oh, rash swearing, thoughtlessly, carelessly swearing. Leviticus 5:4.
Come on.
Far too many people stand guilty of this sin. They have sworn and cursed so much, even the name of God, that they do it with no thoughts whatever. In fact, whatsoever. In fact, every other word is a false oath of profanity or vulgarity.
So guys, look at this. What do we start off with in verse 1? Yeah, but where was the setting? Look at the setting. Where was the setting? Court. Let's see. Let's say you start cursing in court. What happens? Stop and think about it. Let's see. Start lying in court. What happens?
You can go to jail.
What'd you say?
You can go to jail.
Yes. He can even give you time for it. Right. You know what I'm saying? He can even put time on you because you've now lied. You not only have lied, but you've lied to either, under oath, and you lied to either protect someone or you lied to make sure that that person goes. Either way, you've created a problem for that person. Either way. God says, you're not to swear. Then I've used this other thought. Look at the idea of swearing. How many people have you heard talking and they just talk to you? And sometimes I'm talking to you on the phone and I can hear a curse word come out of your lips. Stop and think about it. You can hear a curse word. He said, yeah, but I wasn't talking about God. But whose child are you?
God.
You got it. But whose child are you? You're God's child. So watch this. Then maybe you weren't talking about the person you're talking to. Maybe you were talking about someone else. But the bottom line is you represent Christ. You're an ambassador for Christ. You have no business swearing, cursing, period. What are you saying? I've said this and I continue to keep saying, here's the hardest thing in the world with us. It's called change. It's called change. Can you change? Because you've come into Christ. And because you've come into Christ, you're going to do something I told you that the world can't do. I've said it over and over. Maybe sooner or later the drill, it really get into your head. Whatever you do, God is just the opposite. I hate, he says, I love. He says, she slapped me. You say what? Turn the other cheek. You say they curse you. You say, you don't curse them. You do what? You love them. It's just the opposite. Everything is the opposite of what the world gives. And so watch this. Then what are you doing, God? I said this to my wife last night. It's the ideal of what you call a normal behavior that really is an irrational behavior. It's an unacceptable behavior. God wants you to change what's irrational to make it become acceptable. But watch this. You can't do it. This is what guilt is about. Guilt is something that God has given to you to put on your head to make you think about it. It's called the Holy Spirit pricking your heart. To give you, wait a minute, you know what you're doing isn't right. Your spirit is trying to tell you it's not right. Your spirit is saying, God loves you so much, he wants to bring you home. But if you don't change, hear me? But if you don't change, then how can I bring you home? You don't understand. You won't change here. Did you know what you'll do in heaven? You won't change there. You'll tell God how to do things. God came, sent his son then for a reason. Not just to save mankind, but to educate mankind. Don't you understand? Education changes your thinking. Hear me? Education changes your thinking. A man that's dumber than dumb, he knows one way to handle his business. He puts up his fist and say, bring it. He cusses folks out because this is all he knows. But when a man then becomes educated, he says, guess what? I'll see you in court. Think about it. He doesn't fuss. He don't fight you. He ain't going to curse at you. I said, I'll never forget it. Many years ago, a refrigerator, me and my wife, I had put it on level or something, Renee. And anyway, I finally had enough and I went in and Lenny to go get it and they had sold it. They had sold my refrigerator. I said, it did nothing. And the guy was saying, well, we can get you something else. I says, no. That was the one that I paid for, so that is the one that I want. And so now he wants to say something. I said, sir. Either you give me the one that I paid for, or I'll see you in court. See, I'm not going to fuss it. Now he want to curse it. You know, you bring it, you do it on me. He wants to do all that. But I spoke my piece and I walked away. And guess what? The courts contacted him. The case came pretty close. The court contacted him. He was willing now to meet whatever needs, put my money back in my pocket, and then making sure that we get something else to come and say, and give me back my money. He knew it was going to cost him. Why? Education removes foolishness. It removes this, well, come on, we're going to knock one another out. Education says, all you walk away with is a hospital bill that, watch this, that if you're on county, you don't even pay for it. So I didn't do anything. But an educated man says, I'll hit you where it hurts. Boy, I dig into that back pocket. Hear me? I'll get in your back pocket. You wish that you have never messed with me, because I'll come to the back pocket. Well, watch this. Education is what changes you. Here's what God is saying to them. I don't want you to do any of these things. So far what we've read. Why? Because I'm going to show you how to get around this. I'm educating you so that you'll know how to handle the situation. I told you our biggest issue is, and not just us, but us in particular. See, the world, you say, I wish they would change. They can't. You don't know how. But we, which are in Christ, can. Because we know how. Because we have eternal life that awaits us. We have a Christ who loves us so much that awaits us. So we have a real reason for changing our lives. But the world doesn't. The world says, you don't understand, I've heard the get-rich schemes, and I keep taking them. We say, I've heard about Christ, and I'm going to take it. So therefore, I've got to do what? Change. See how important it is to change? To let go and let God. What are you talking about? Even when it comes to forgiving one another. The world says, hey, forget you. It's so detrimental to you that if you don't forgive them, God won't forgive you. It stops you from entering into the kingdom of heaven. You say, since I know God is real, you say, I'll change. Let me go to, I didn't even create the problem, but let me go to him and say, I'm sorry. For whatever I've done, I'm sorry. And watch this. And if you want to bring it to my attention, whatever it is that I've done, then bring it. The bottom line is, I'm still sorry. If you want to make this picture ugly when it don't have to be, and just accept the wonderful words of forgiveness, then we can move on. But if you want to sit there and keep fussing and fighting and keep reminding me of what I've done, I've forgiven you, you haven't forgiven me. You haven't talked to God. It says that you refuse to be educated. But I have taken on a level of education. That's why I can ask for forgiveness. You say, is that all there? You watch. It sure is. He says in 5, he says, watch.
So it should.
Guilty in any of these ways, he must confess in what way he has sinned.
So if anyone is what? Guilty of what?
I'm reading from my phone stuff.
That's okay, go ahead. I'll read it from that. That's okay.
When anyone is guilty in any of these ways, he must confess in what way he has sinned.
Lord have mercy. Did you hear that? You can't even get around it. Watch this. Remember, he's talking about your omissions and your commissions. He's trying to bring to our attention everything that's going on. I don't know who this is, but this ain't my ring. This is Kenneth. You should know we're in class. Anybody, you should know we're in class. So watch this. If this is the case, guys, look at what's going on. Pull your paper. The remedy for sin, what? See it? You can read.
The remedy for such sins is clearly stated by God. It is the sin offering. A, the person must confess the specific sin. B, the person must approach God through the sacrifice, offer a female lamb or goat.
Stop there. That's why I mentioned it. I said they hear so I can point them out. That's why I mentioned Matthew's 18th chapter. Right? How many times have we forgive somebody, Julie?
70 times 7, 490.
490 times. So 490 times. So stop and think about it. If that be the case, then when we have forgiven someone, we're to do what in the 3rd chapter?
Go back to how it was.
In the 3rd chapter, we're to do what? Right. Oh. It's called bear.
Fruit of forgiveness.
You gotta bear it now. Now you bear fruit. Bear is the act of showing. You can say, I forgive you 400 times to me, Julie. I forgive you, Warren. Lord, I said I forgive you, so that takes care of it. It means 0.
Zilch, nada, nothing.
Nada. What are you saying, God? Bear fruit. Show me you've forgiven me. Show me that you've let go. How do I show you, Lord? Forgive is to turn from. What do you mean? To turn from whatever it was that created this problem, let go. It's called reconciliating that which was old, bringing it back into the existence that it once was, where we're friends again. A great example would be, ever seen children get in a fight with one another? Mm-hmm. And you want to go over there and stop it, and somebody said, leave them alone, let it go. You know, because the fight done already stopped. And if you just hang around long enough, they're playing together again.
Mm-hmm. Remember?
Yes.
If the husband left you, and then after that you realize, you know, he was wrong, and then ask for forgiveness, you forgive him, but does it mean that you're going to take him back?
That's a totally different ballgame. You did forgive him.
Yeah.
Because then you're gonna have to pull. You're removing a lot. You just said the husband leaves you. That's called abandonment. God gives us laws concerning abandonment.
Ask for forgiveness.
Watch this, but it's called abandonment. God sets up laws for in cases like that too. I've asked for forgiveness. You abandoned me. I have a right to say, you're right, I forgive you. But I also have a right to say, but I'm not going to be abused. So what? So I have a right then to marry someone else. Someone said, whoa, 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 whoa. Marry somebody else. I have a right to marry someone else. Because you walked out of that relationship. You don't realize that you broke that bond. Once a bond is broken in a marriage, that party that's innocent has a right to now make a decision. Do I want to be with you? Now hear me. That person can't say, well, I'm going to go on and be with that person. Then don't ask God when he slaps you upside the head. Don't ask God when he treats you bad again, all over again. Why? Because God gave you the option. He told you it's over. This person has proven they don't love you. Words are cheap. I told you it bears what? Fruit. These words must bear fruit. They must prove that you have forgiven, or they have forgiven you. It must be proven. We say, well, they said it. Okay. So when did they show it? You don't get it. A man or a woman, that a lot of times they make a statement like that when it's behind abandonment, is because the one that they with left. That's why they're knocking on your door again. You hear me? Failing to understand, you still remain second, and I wouldn't be back. But I realize the one that I'm with don't want me either. So what I'll do is go back to the person that I know is a fool. You hear me? And so I'll run back to that person. Because they'll take me back. Watch this. That's somebody that doesn't understand scriptures. This person has broken a bond. Super glue can't put it back together again. God says, let them go. They're not going to be faithful to you.
And you're free to remarry.
Right.
Yes. Yes. Huh?
Oh, I just said she's free to remarry.
Well,
With the forgiveness thing, and the one, in this sense, the victim needs to bear fruit of forgiveness. In regards to the perpetrator,
go ahead.
aren't they to bear some fruit that they're no longer going to be victimizing people?
That's both ways. It's every bit of both ways. It's not a one way. This forgiveness includes every party. But watch this. But what if that party that you've asked for forgiveness says, forget you. I'm not interested in forgiving you. It's still no longer on your shoulders.
Right.
You have asked that person to forgive you. Now that person has got to, watch this, that person can either unlock the doors of heaven or keep them locked. What do you mean? For themselves. Meaning, if they don't forgive, God locks the doors. And a lot of times, here's what we do. I've seen this. We just run to another church. Thinking, well, I got away from that person. Really? That church you just ran into, God is there too. That same God. And so what did you do? He's even said now, your worship is in vain. He's even said now, wait a minute, but this happened 40 years ago. Did you know what you were doing 40 years ago? Yes. Did you ever go back and ask that person to forgive you? No. Then you better turn that ship around and head back. You mean 40 years my worship has been in vain? 40 years your worship has been in vain. It means nothing to God. I heard him say, on that day, he says, many, didn't he say anything? Shall come unto me. Lord, Lord, didn't I do many wonderful things in your name? He says, hey, depart from me. Oh, by the way, you did work. You did do some works. Depart from me. You are a worker, but your work was of iniquity. It was in vain. I never knew you. What do you mean you never knew me? You had a chance just like everybody else to turn that ship around. But your pride, your stubbornness says, I can't do it. I told you, I'm sorry. I ain't going to hell behind something I could straighten out, I could fix myself. Stop and think about it. By the way, guys, these are guilt offerings that were on, so you'll know this. What does the word guilt mean? What does the word guilt mean?
Wrongful.
Maybe that's the problem. You don't see it. What is guilt?
Feeling bad.
You said what, Steve?
I know that's mercy, isn't it? Gift, a pitiful state of guilt.
Your conscience.
wrongful conscience.
So you said conscience, I like that. So you're saying your conscience, something's making you feel guilty. I wonder what it is that's making you feel guilty.
The Holy Spirit.
Come on. And so when something's brought to your attention to make you feel guilty, don't you see what God is doing for you? He's trying to get you out of that state of guilt. In this case, they're getting ready to make some sacrifices. In your case, you need to make some sacrifices. They tell me the hardest thing there is. We call it man up. The hardest thing there is to go back and tell somebody you're sorry behind something you did. That's the hardest thing, the hardest one of them all. Think about it. What makes it so hard? Because you don't realize how you have aligned yourself up with the world. Because if you have lined yourself up with Christ, there's nothing to go back and tell that person, I'm so sorry. What can we do to better our relationship? I am so sorry I tore it up. I caused the problem. Please forgive me. You connected it with a relationship of marriage. And so I don't have a problem with you connecting it with a relationship of marriage. But even marriage needs to bear fruit. Because when you stop and weigh it out, why are you at my doorsteps? And you weren't at my doorsteps. And when I was crying on the bed and because you were hurting my feelings, it didn't bother you. Stop and think about it. So you got to go back and think these things out. I shed many a tear, and you didn't think nothing of my tears. You didn't even call me. And when you did, it was about something else. It wasn't about me. And so what brought you to your senses? My answer would be, where is she? Huh? She's gone. You hear what I'm saying? Let's get the truth out. And when the truth is exposed, now you got to make a decision. Now that this person has brought it to my attention, what am I going to do? I don't know about you, but I wouldn't walk, I'd run. Because my feelings will say, well, you know, feelings take you into flashbacks. Flashbacks take you into the good old days. There's no good old days about someone that hurt you. You move on. God has swung those doors open for you to move on. We will get into 1 Corinthians 7th chapter because we're on it on Sundays. And I will talk about that because there's 4 reasons that God allows you out of a marriage. And there's so many people that sit in the mess and they're miserable. And you can't figure out why they're so miserable. And then they think they worship is acceptable to God. God doesn't like a miserable work. Okay, you got it. Yeah, it's time for you to go. Yeah. But stop and think about it, guys. Look at this. I've got C, the results of the very same wonderful experience as for the individual who does not commit such horrendous sins. The person who commits a terrible sin, no matter who he is or how terrible the sin, is forgiven. He is forgiven if he approaches God through the sacrifice. The sacrifice is a symbol of Christ, made atonement for the terrible sin. The sacrifice is the ransom of a price paid for his sin. The terrible sin is reconciliated to God and forgiven through the sacrifice. So watch this. We went back. Let's get on. He talks about in 6. He said he shall what?
Also bring his guilt offering to the Lord for his sin which he has committed. A female from a flock, a lamb, or a goat as a sin offering. So the priest shall make atonement on his behalf for his sin.
Go back to the beginning and answer that question. He says what? There's an answer to your question. He says what?
He shall also bring his guilt offering.
What kind of offering?
Guilt offering.
How does he bring a guilt offering if he's not guilty? Think about it. How can you bring a guilt offering if you're not guilty? You are aware of what you've done. That's what he's saying. And watch this. And you're now bold enough to realize it, and now you're wise enough to go and ask that sin to be removed from you. That's wisdom. Or you can die in your sins. I told you, you hear me say it all the time, because it is true. Everybody that dies in your family goes to heaven. Stop and think about it. Everybody that you did. Well, we don't know, so you shouldn't judge. When somebody make that statement to you, that tells me you already know that person wasn't worth a quarter. But for some reason or another, we don't judge. And watch this. You don't judge, huh? No, we don't judge. You already judge. You're guilty because you just lied. So you're guilty of that. You need to now go get another sacrifice because you're guilty. You just lied about something that you pretended you didn't know. I said it's a sad day when you know Aunt Susie or Aunt Joey or Uncle Joey. You know that joker stayed drunk. You know that joker never went to church. But all of a sudden, he's holier than holy. He makes it to heaven. I've been into 2 funerals within 2 weeks, you know. And I sat back and I listened. In both of these funerals, you know what I'm talking about, in both of these funerals, I was wanting to hear that this person loved the Lord. Then in wanting to hear if this person loved the Lord, then I wanted to hear the fruit. And I didn't hear it. I heard one say his church was in the garage. Didn't he say it? Remember, he said it. His church was in the garage. I said, no, my church is at the sanctuary. Where's your church at? It's in the garage. I brought it to the gentleman's attention, meaning the son's attention. Did he go to worship? Well, no, he stopped going a long time ago. Wow. So you stop doing God's will, but when you die, you expect God to take you in. You're not even aware of the sin that you've committed. You don't have an offering to give to God because you don't see it as guilt. That's why I said he says take the guilt offering. You don't see it as you've committed a sin. You don't see it as you committed guilt. I went to another one. All I could hear was his accolades of NASA and all these beautiful things he did in this world. I never heard what you do for the Lord. Did you hear me? Why? You can't put down what he didn't do. Do you hear what I'm saying? And so what do? We hope. No. Remove the hope and put a word called wish. That would be much better, because hope is the assurance that person goes to heaven. Wish is how they live, and I wish God would take them in. Big difference. Use your worldly terminology. Don't use biblical thoughts, biblical talk on worldly people. I told you, all our folks, when they die, we say they go to heaven. So now look at this. The offering that he made was from a female, right? From the flock, right? Mm-hmm. But did you know also in this offering that he's mentioning, he's talking about what type of class of people?
Poor.
No. What class of people is he talking about? And it can tie in with 2 classes of people.
The Richard and Mr. Pat?
Yes, sure can. It can tie in with 2 classes because this is a goat or a lamb. So it can tie in with 2 classes of people. Isn't that amazing how God is making sure that everybody has a chance to be redeemed? Everybody has a chance to ask for forgiveness. So now he's talking about those that can afford these things. He says, so you bring them for your offering. But remember, you don't touch them. Remember, the priest has got to touch them. So then watch this. In 7, whose term is it? 7, he says what?
If he is not able to bring lamb, then he shall bring to the Lord for his trespass which he has committed 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, one as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering.
Now who do you think he's talking about? Pull your paper up. See it right after the terrible sin, the sinners is reconciled. See it read. How
How
can?
can a poor person secure forgiveness of sin? God tells the poor person how to be forgiven. Poor person is not excluded from forgiveness and salvation. Poor person must offer 2 doves or
Didn't get what you said, Denise?
Yes.
young
Here they come.
pigeons.
They're offered 2 doves. Go watch this. Go
2
ahead.
young pigeons. One for the sin offering and the other for burnt offering.
But if you brought a what? A goat or a lamb, it would include them both. But in this case, you got to bring something so tiny that you're going to have to bring 2. So now watch this. He says what? The poor person?
Must have the priest first offer the sin offering. He must put it to death. He must sprinkle the blood against the side of the altar. He must pour out the remaining blood at the base of the altar.
Read.
The poor person must then have the priest offer the burnt offering as prescribed.
4.
The poorest of the poor even had provision made for them to be forgiven. Must offer 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour, 2 quarts, 2 liters, not to put oil or incense on it. Must have the priest make the offering, to offer a handful to the Lord as a memorial or token portion, giving the remainder to the priest.
Back to your Bible.
I have a question real quick. So, in 6, we see that, I don't want to say that we'll pass that, but my question is, for this offering, it said offer of a female. And I was wondering, I'm pretty sure there's a thing to that I want to better understand.
I'm sorry.
Well,
He's too far away.
He wanted to know
yeah.
what's the significance in female being offered when
Is
this
there?
one is male. And he knows the significance to it. He just want to better understand.
I remember we talked about that a couple of weeks ago concerning this offering where it was a female versus.
Well, for the atonement, when we looked at last was for the atonement, it could be a male or female.
Right.
For the sin offering, it had to be a male.
Right.
But for this says a female, verse 6, so I want to better understand that.
And why would he do that? What's the reason behind it?
She's poor.
Because Eve.
To the son of Clint.
This is it. No. It says a female, right? Who's setting the rules and regulations? Who's setting them? God's setting the rules and regulations, right? God says, watch this. I've given you one from one side, the male. I've given you the other side, take it, either or. And now I'm asking you to do what? You know what? I'm going to do one better than that.
Could it be because she trespassed her?
I'm going to do one better than that. That's an interesting question that has an answer. Look like you got homework. That's a good one. Look like you got homework. Go ahead and look into that and find out. And then watch this. I'll see if your homework has the answer that I have for it. Okay? But no, that's good. but I won't, but I'm gonna ask you to bring it back to the class.
Oh,
So they
okay. I was just gonna look back and say thanks a lot, Janelle.
I know.
I'll get it, yeah, because the sin offering was male.
Yes.
Atonement was male and female.
Yes.
It's trespass offering is female.
You can,
He built like one more.
I thought atonement was just male.
no, it was.
Atonement was male.
It was, the two. He's right. He's right.
I thought peace was male and female.
Peace was male and female. Sure was. You're right. Sure
I
was.
haven't written that.
Okay.
Yeah.
She did her homework. No. She did her homework.
She's excluded from homework.
Good job. Good job, sir. Good job.
Don't copy her.
So guys, watch this. Come on now, because I tried to get out at 5. He says what? So where are we at 7?
8 now.
8? 8 says what?
And he shall bring them to the priest, who shall offer that which is for the sin of offering first, and wringing off its head from its neck, but shall not divide it completely.
9? 9? Go ahead. Oh,
And
she's
he
not.
shall,
Then
he shall sprinkle of the blood of the sin offering upon the side of the altar, and the rest of the blood shall be run out at the bottom of the altar. It is a sin offering.
So he's not going to he's not going to tear it apart for a reason, huh? Because you got to do something with that blood, right? You see that? Because you got to do something with that blood. Let's go. So, let's go. Come on, so since he's here, since he's gone, let him miss a lot. Let's go. Then what? Then what? He says what? 10 says what?
The second he shall then prepare as a burnt offering according to the ordinance. So the priest shall make atonement on his behalf for his sin which he has committed, and it will be forgiven him.
You don't think that priest is important?
Nah.
Let's see, what was that priest to do that he had to make sure that he made sure every day it was done?
That fire kept
Fire
burning.
and burn.
That fire better keep going. He ain't doing nothing. All he's doing is making sure the fire is burned. So we shouldn't be having to give him too much because all he's doing is just making the fire
He's doing everything.
going. Do you catch it?
And he's got to keep
Watch it.
himself clean.
What'd you say? Come on.
Then he's got to clean everything else
He's
before.
got to keep
and-
himself from sin,
Yep.
even though he's going to make some atonements. But watch this. And then we wonder why he took a handful, remember, of the grain. What happened to the rest of the grain?
Went to the
Okay.
priest.
Isn't that something? But he's not doing too much. This is what I'm saying, even with your ministers today. You don't see what's going on other than he shows up Sunday in a suit. He preaches the word of God. He goes to have lunch. Come on, why would this? Then if he's got to go preach in a convalescent, then he does. If he doesn't, then he comes at 5 o'clock and he sits down. Man, what a life. He's got a pretty quiet life, huh, Pat? He's got a life where, shoot, everybody would want that life because, shoot, he don't do nothing. And watch this. And yet, he's to be well paid. That's Bible. And yet, he's to be well paid. I don't understand it. How in the world could this be? Let's see. This priest is to do what for these people? All parties.
Make offerings for their sins.
He's to make offerings for their sins, but watch this. He's got to do something for himself, right? Your sin can't be offered if he dead. But y'all know what I'm saying, right? Stop and think about it, because if he doesn't make the right atonement for himself, you ain't got no priest. He's gone. Wait a minute. You still want to take that role? You still may want to be interested in taking on the ministry? That's why I said we keep missing this. Even what I teach, God has jotted it down. Did you hear me? I am now held responsible for it. My sins are nothing compared to yours. Yes.
I don't think most people, because again, they don't know because they aren't made privy to the fact you do bear all of our woes, because your phone is always ringing.
Go ahead.
So just like he has to bear the sin,
You got it.
you have to bear all our woes, try to keep us in the mind frame that we can stay focused on the goal. So
I like that.
That's a lot of bearing in and of itself, because now you call me, I got to tell you the right thing. If I don't,
That's true. Makes sense.
so I think that's a lot of bearing that people just take for granted and don't even see or understand that.
You miss sleep at night.
Yeah.
Right.
that-
I made a statement, I don't know, was it week before last, when I finally admitted my pain. And I said, when I went into the doctor, I told the doctor, I've got a pain that's going up the side of my leg and it hurts. And he asked me, so what do you do? I said, well, I'm a minister. His thought was, then you stand a lot. Remember I told y'all that? He said, you stand a lot, so it's going to be 3 or 4 months for this finally goes away. If you keep taking the medicine that I've given you.
Incident.
But I didn't tell him because he didn't understand. One of the greatest employments in the whole universe is a minister. Run that by you again. Someone says the President of the United States, the greatest responsibility in this whole universe is a minister. It's determined, his life, his works are pending on taking a diversified body of people and trying to get them to see what God has shown him. Did you hear me? It's so hard. But you think, I don't get it. Why you can't see it? I was sharing with them today. I sat down with this lady last week who was struggling. And I said, I could have easily said, it's done, we don't need to talk about it, let me walk. But I said, you're dealing with a diversified body of people. You can see it, but it doesn't mean they can see it. Your responsibility is to try to get people to understand why you can't see hell in front of you. Because all you want to see is heaven in front of you. You don't want to see what happens when you don't do what God will do to you. You only want to see what God will do to you because, quote unquote, he loves you. What I'm saying is this: you don't want to accept the fact that the God that you serve is a just God. He will take care of us all. He is very real. And if a minister is studying like he should every day, then he's beginning to see, or he sees, whether you know or not, you. He sees you. And he's saying, I need to put a headlock around this person and hold on to them. Because they don't realize where they're headed. When a minister doesn't care for you, don't walk, run. My son made a statement to me, and then I'm going to get back. But my son made a statement to me yesterday. He says, Dad, you're very compassionate. Right? I told you that? You're very compassionate. He says, so therefore you get hurt a lot because you care for people. So you draw into them and attach yourself to them. He said, you should take the time and get to know him, and then you wouldn't do this. But you draw yourselves into him. He says, and you're going to always get hurt. I listened to him, and I said back my statement. Then I'll always get hurt. He didn't quite understand. But all I was saying is, that is my responsibility, to have compassion. I've made this statement. I got it. You need to get it. You've heard me say that. I got it. You need to get it. You don't even understand the female goat, right, Jamal? The female goat. I got it. You see what I'm saying? You need to get it. So what are you saying? Therefore, what God is doing is giving me the advantage of being able to see through you and see where you fault, and then try to pull you out of it before it's too late. Why are you going this direction? Because that's what that priest is doing. That priest is having to take your guilt offering. That priest knows what he has to do. It's not what I think this is what I should do. He knows exactly what he has to do. And he knows why he's doing it. So he's going to be extremely careful with your offering. He doesn't bring your sacrifice. You bring your sacrifice. Hold on. This sacrifice that you're bringing is not collectively, it's individually. It's not, I'm bringing a goat for the family, so cut it up and shed the blood. It is, I'm bringing a goat for myself. And if there's 7 or 8 of us in the family, then 7 or 8 of us need to bring one. Do you hear what I'm saying? See, we don't get this. We tend to think collectively. This is not collectively. All of this is based upon individual. It's called a guilt offering. It's called a omission, commission. Some things I am aware of what I've done when it comes to sinning. And then what about those things that I wasn't aware of, but yet I've still sinned? This is what I'm bringing this offering for. I'm asking God, please, take away my sins. Guys, I said this is a guilt offering. This is a forgiveness of their sins. God is, somebody says, going to roll their sins over. Guys, this is not only to roll over, but to remember them no more. Stop and think about it. This is what these sins are. This is what this offering is. So you can have all the pride in the world if you want it. I told you, it's called change. If you don't want to change, keep your goat. Keep your doves. But if you want to change, then bring it. Because you're bringing it for forgiveness. That's what you're bringing it for. You're asking God, please forgive me so that I may become a better soul for you. That the world may recognize that I am an ambassador for you. That's what you're doing. That the world may see you different. They don't see you like everybody else sees you. This is what this forgiveness is about. Guys, watch this. He makes this statement. Where we're at, he makes this statement. He says, here it is. He makes this statement. We were at 10. He says, the second he shall then prepare as a burnt offering according to the ordinance, so that the priest shall make atonement on his behalf for his sins which he has committed, and will be forgiven. But if his means are insufficient for 2 turtle doves or young pigeons, then for his offering for that which he has sinned, he shall bring a tenth of ephah of fine flour for a sin offering. Should not put oil on it or place incense on it, for it is a sin offering. You do not do what? You don't cover You don't add. You leave it just like it is. What are you doing? Some people can't even afford a dove or bird. You got some flower knives, bring it. Jesus is meeting you every kind of way he could to forgive you of your sin. See, God does his part. We just got to do ours. But he makes a way for us. He says in 12, he shall bring you to the priest, and the priest shall take his handful of it as a memorial portion and offer it up in smoke on the altar, which the offering of the Lord by fire. It is a sin offering. So the priest shall make atonement for him concerning his sin, which he has committed from one of these, and it shall be forgiven him. Then the rest shall become the priest's like grain offering. Then the Lord spoke to Moses. I don't even know if I should go there. If a person acts unfaithfully and sins unintentionally against the Lord's holy things, then he shall bring his guilt offering to the Lord, a ram without defect from the flock according to your valuation, and silver by shekels, in terms of the shekels, the sanctuary for guilt offering. Watch this. He's going to do this. He shall make restitution
For that which he has sinned against the holy thing.
Come on.
And shall add it to a fifth part of it, and give it to the priest. The priest shall then make atonement for him with the ram of the guilt offering, and it will be forgiven him.
And there's something, guys, watch this. He's saying, after you didn't did it, that ain't enough, then give 20%. That's what he's saying. And then you're to give 20%. What do you mean? To the priest. And the priest is to turn around and do what the priest is supposed to do. But Rob, I thought it was just 10%. Did you catch it? But I thought it was just 10%. Why are we talking about 20%? Isn't it something? Watch this. Back to my paper. The Hebrew word for holy things, go, refers to anything that is holy or set apart to God, such as things. A sanctuary, furnishings, worship, believers, people who are dedicated and consecrated to God. God declares that any person who sins against the holy things of God is guilty for him and must face the judgment. The person must approach God to be set free. Approach God through sacrifice. Keep in mind, the person has to offer a ram, a perfect ram, one without blemish. Note the animal has to be valuable. That is, of such size and weight that it would be fully valuable. So then watch this. Got to go on the scales. Got to measure up to see what's going on. That's what he means by your 16th verse. So he opens that up. Watch this. The person pays restitution for the harm done. Did you see this, guys? B. You see it? You got it, decent reading.
The person must pay restitution.
On the back page.
The person must pay restitution for the harm done, plus 20% interest.
Plus what?
20% interest.
Isn't that something? How about just 5? How about 10?
20%.
Why 20%? Didn't it get up pretty high? You can't squeeze $2 out of some people. And watch this. God says 20%. Wait, whoa. 20%? You don't have to give. You don't have to. You don't have to do anything. But I'm bringing this to your attention because those that were willing to give, and you've got an issue, by the way, what we miss is, why 20%? Because this isn't against man. This sin is against who?
Yeah.
Did you catch it? but sin is against God. What do you mean? Let me see if I can help you. You don't forsake the assembly, conscience for man. You forsake the assembly of God. Did you hear me? Did you hear me? That's why you bring in your 20%. Because you didn't offend man. You may have thought that's what it was, but you didn't offend man. You offended God. And because you offended God, well, what do you mean? That's why he told you in that Philippians, the 2nd chapter, that 10th verse, every knee shall bow. Because what you've done or what you've said is, to my son, too bad you crawled on that tree. I'm sorry. Get out of my face. The Father, not the Son, the Father says, you don't get it. You're going to respect my son. You don't get it. My son died on that tree for you. You don't get it. But I'll make you get it. Because you didn't offend man. You offended me. How's a poor person ever to give 20% when you can even give a dove? Stop and think about it. Stop and think about it. When you couldn't even give a dove. Now you got to come up with 20% of your flour. That, watch us, that you were feeding your family on. So now you come up short again. Do you see what it produces? It produces calamity after calamity after calamity for you. And you don't even realize it. I tell folks, there are two sins that we fail to understand. You heard of public sin? When you've said something out and the church becomes aware of it, that's a public sin. You need to make that confession. Then there's that personal sin. When you were saying something to that individual, that you need to go talk to that individual and resolve that. Then there's that godly sin. When you have shamed God, I can't say it enough, guys. Somebody's watching you. I can't say it enough. I don't care what you think you are least in the kingdom. Somebody's watching you. Somebody thinks a lot of you and you don't even realize it. Somebody's following you. Someone thinks the world of you. And you let them down. You didn't let them down. You let God down. I said, you heard me talk about the minister. Now let me talk about you. Because you don't realize how important you are in God's kingdom. The church grows when you bring souls. No, well, God asks the church daily. When you bring them, he sure does. He's not going to interfere. He will never headlock somebody and bring them to the church. He will never do that. They need to interfere with their free will. It is our responsibility to bring souls to Christ. When we don't meet the godly obligations, you don't sin against man, you sin against God. Stop and think about it. My time is expired. Think about it, guys.